This is one of the several major rulings coming before the Supreme Court before it wraps up its term.
Let's bring in Professor Stephen Schwinn, a professor of law at UIC. Professor, thanks for joining us tonight. How are you?
Yeah.
Thanks so much for having me, Rob.
Oh, pleasure. We've got a lot of questions for you. And let's start with today's ruling on affirmative action. What would be the new ways colleges can achieve diverse student bodies, like some of the justice suggested?
So, Rob, colleges now are going to have to turn to what we call race-neutral ways of ensuring racial diversity among their students. And so they're going to be looking at things like socioeconomic background, geography, where people came from. And then importantly, and the court actually said that colleges can do this, it's going to look for student essays and student applications that indicate that students have overcome adversity because of race. So by using those so-called race-neutral ways, we're going to see colleges and universities still strive to achieve the kind of racial diversity that they could before this decision.
Well, it's definitely reshaping the admissions policy, and for many people who are applying for the application process, they do tell their journey story, and many times it includes race. How about the first generation going? How will that play out when they do their essay about being the first gen in their families to go to college?
Cheryl, I think that's a fantastic question. And the truth is, we just don't know at this point. The Supreme Court said that students can talk about overcoming racial adversity as part of their application process, and that schools can actually consider that. But I think as soon as school starts doing that, we're going to start to see a new round of litigation challenging those kinds of actions as considering race, but kind of under the radar. And so there are a lot of unknowns after this decision. Schools are going to be scrambling to adjust their policies, and we're likely to see new rounds of litigation.
What do you think for students of color? Any advice for them? And do you think some colleges will continue to adopt those affirmative action policies despite these rulings?
Well, I'll answer the second question first if I can, Rob. So I don't think schools will continue to use race as part of their admission program, or if they do, they'll be subject to lawsuits in the way that Harvard and University of North Carolina were. Now, what's my advice for students who are applying? Well, and I would give this advice to any student who applies to school. You want to indicate that you're a leader, that you've overcome adversity in all of its different forms. Now, for students of color, they've been subjected to a unique kind of adversity in their lifetime by race. And so they can continue to talk about that. And under the court's ruling, schools can continue to consider it.
Before we talk about the future rulings, one quick question. The impact on corporations and diversity and inclusion, that department in corporations, they said that could be a factor being affected as well with this diversity, inclusion, and race factor.
Cheryl, it certainly could be in two ways. So first off, to the extent that we see less racial diversity in higher education, we'll then see that replicated in the corporate world. The other way here is that to the extent that corporations or governments are adopting race-based affirmative action programs in hiring, this program and the court's telegraphing that it's really scrutinizing race-based decisions like never before. That's going to impact those kinds of affirmative action programs as well.
Cheryl, you just mentioned future rulings. We may see two tomorrow. Let's stick with colleges and students. Can we expect, Professor, a ruling on student loan forgiveness from the Supreme Court tomorrow?
I think it's almost certain to come tomorrow, Rob. And this is the ruling where the Biden administration had granted loan forgiveness up to $20,000 for qualified applicants. States and individuals challenged it. They took their challenge all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court really has sat on this one for a long, long time. So I do expect a ruling tomorrow.
It's going to be a busy day, perhaps, because the final day before they take a break for the summer. How about another pending case, Professor Schwinn, the First Amendment rights case refusing service to an LGBTQ people? How about this one, and how will that rate tomorrow? And can they get to both cases in one day?
They certainly can, Cheryl, and this is one that they've put off as well. It's a really interesting and troubling case where you've got a website designer who's refused to serve couples that are not one man and one woman. And what she says is that a state law that bans discrimination based on sexual orientation and sexual identity is interfering with her free speech rights because that law compels her to serve these couples that for religious reasons she doesn't want to serve. I do expect a ruling from the Supreme Court on this tomorrow, maybe next week, but it certainly could come as early as tomorrow.
Yeah, Professor Schwinn from UIC, thanks for joining us, breaking this stuff down for us, making it really simple and understandable. We appreciate your time on this Thursday night.
Well, thanks so much. It's been a real honor to be with you.
Yeah.
Watch breaking news on YouTube. Subscribe to ABC7 Chicago Eyewitness News.